We've also looked to work closely with the logistics sector on where carrier facilities are located, pinch points, and we've clearly identified that the Midlands of Scotland is certainly a pinch point to focus on, and that seems to be an area where we need to really take advantage of.
Savings account, you know, we chase savings. I don't know if that allows direct debits.
Where's that coming from?
Chuck it back.
Okay. All okay? So we're supporting the analysis and creation of the parcels by rail commercial model. So what I mean by that is this is just the first stage, converted passenger stock, but we need to work with the logistics sector on how to integrate with their services. Rail will never take over from road, it has to integrate with existing facilities. But we also want to ensure further advantages we go through, and also reduce the cost of operation for operators, of course. So that's where the Swift Plus battery comes in, which I mentioned. We've also looked at specific changes dependent on the opportunity, so whether we amend the restraint system to maximise capacity or not. Again, making sure that it's commercially viable for all concerned. We've looked and engaged with the wider rail industry to support the concept, whether that be Network Rail in terms of access to city centre stations and the viability of doing so. Identification of locations across the network, electrified locations being key, of course. Gauging and train route clearance. We've worked with Logistics UK to support and promote the concept to parcel carriers in particular, but also understanding the logistics sector so we can best implement any changes that we want to make as well. Of course, as Richard Moody mentioned earlier, there's a rail freight growth target which is due to be announced later this year. We work with the DfT and GBRTT on what the concept entails. And it's crucial that we have their support and policy reflects that in future. You can see some of the images below. So we did a number of trials with GB Rail Freight last year at Euston Station, Port of Tilbury and others, also Leeds Station. So the aim of the trials was really to assess the feasibility of accessing city centre stations, the speed on which you load and unload cages predominantly, but also how safe is it. You know, if you imagine you could run a 12-car set into a station with hundreds and hundreds of cages, it needs to be safe and risk assessed, so that's quite important. We've done time and motion trials at Tilbury and Euston, measuring the loading and unloading times against HGVs. Varamis rail services, so I'll leave most of this to Phil after, but 5 nights a week service, Glasgow to Birmingham return, which we're doing at the moment. So there's lots and lots of good stuff going on. However, there are some challenges to the concept which we need to try and get through to grow the concept long term. There's certainly limited infrastructure in terms of electrified infrastructure. We need more rail accessed warehousing which is fully electrified. If you take Daventry as one example, that's not fully electrified. And that adds cost and time in terms of loco hauling into those facilities or using shunting equipment. So government policy will dictate that, but really any rail freight accessed warehouse facility needs to be fully electrified. Commitment from the logistics sector, and this is, I would say, one of the biggest things. We haven't quite got that yet. I'm not sure whether, apart from Royal Mail, parcel carriers have had limited exposure to the rail sector. But we need their commitment to work with us as to how to take this forward. Cost pressures versus road. So rail may never be as affordable as road, but has many benefits. Speed, it's cleaner, less drivers, HGV driver shortage being a point I'm referring to. And as I said earlier, direct access to city centres with no congestion. But regardless of that, parcel companies need a competitive offering. So we need to always have that in mind. I mentioned this to a few people today, but obviously industrial action has not helped. if you're a Amazon, DPD, DHL, and you see that in the press every day, that really dents confidence. So the sooner that comes to an end, the better. So there's some quite big challenges, but the opportunity is massive. And I think rail freight can capitalise on that, but there's some work to do. So in terms of next steps, we're working with freight operators to prove the concept during this year. And the overall target is to deliver modal shift from road to rail. And of course, leases for Class 321 Swift units from our side of things. So that's the end of the presentation. Hopefully that gives you a good overview about what we're doing and the concept more generally. But any questions this afternoon, then come and find me. But yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And we will be exploring this topic in an article that will be published in Rail Technology magazine next month. Right, so Phil, please welcome to stage. Tell us about how you are using these trains. And that's the button for you. It's a gentle button.
It's one slide.
Oh, okay.
So thanks everyone. Thanks Milda, thanks Phoebe for inviting us along. And thanks for Unipark for hosting as well. It's a great site. I was at Ukraine at Birmingham last week. It's a great facility. If you've not been there, get there, have a tour around. There's lots of innovation and research. I'm really impressed at the amount of money that must be invested at the moment in rail research. And we want to be big advocates of that in the future as well. And we are today. Yeah, sorry, got the one slide. I've been very busy, so sorry Phoebe, but that's me. That's our train at the moment. And Varamis Rail has been created over the last 3 years by myself to make the most of this opportunity for parcels, light goods, movements on the railway. High speed, fully electric, decarbonisation, green benefits, we're all over it. You know, if we can't do it greener than what we're currently doing it, we won't do it at all, or we'll move to more sustainable means of doing stuff anyway. We can't always move stuff by trains. You know, we're quite happy to go back to the road, whatever the greener option is. But yeah, it's been some journey. Steve was at the very start of that journey from iPort. Great facility they've got there. Another sort of testament to them guys that have developed this freight facility, which is only quite new in recent years, 5 years. I met Steve 3.5 years ago, and it's a great site that they've got there. So get yourself along there later and take a look at what they're doing. What we've basically done, and Sam's alluded to a lot of it, it was always my intention. My background is in railway. I'm a train driver, done a bit in operations, but I've had a grounded, all-round experience at different companies. And what that's brought to me is an underpinning knowledge of what we've got, you know, both in electrification and infrastructure, terminals, things that we've used to do, you know. So where I'm coming at the moment, there's nothing really that innovative about it. You know, we're just going back to what we did many years ago. Not that we don't want to innovate, because technology and innovation will make us better. It'll make us more efficient. It'll make us quicker. And we'll be able to use that going forward to be able to offer the best product that the railway can offer. And look, this isn't about Varamis all the time, so please don't think that I'm not approachable or this is about what I'm doing with Varamis. But the railway as a whole, there's a massive opportunity here. And we've seen this through the pandemic due to the changes in our lifestyles that we've all been sort of had to adapt to. You know, the increase in online shopping, home deliveries, and most of these deliveries are made by road. You know, over 95% of your Amazon parcels or DHL or FedExes are made by road. You know, the railway plays a very small part. And at the moment, you know, the railway offers traditional, you know, goods movements in intermodal aggregates and such forth. And what we're trying to do is offer just something a little bit different. The speed is of the essence to us as well. You know, the speed is what really is going to be the motivating factor to make the change within the sector. So we've got the 4-car train. Like Sam said, Eversholt, you know, they've been superb. They've put their money where their mouth is, basically. Over £2 million has been invested in their part so far. And they've created a train that we've worked together, you know. They've created a train that is bespoke for this service. You won't get a better train out there than this. They've taken into account every factor and every challenge that is put in front of us. We've been able to get through it by researching and looking at things a little bit differently. Really impressed with what Marie was talking about from DB Cargo earlier. There's a lot of synergies between operators. We're only new, But it's interesting to hear Tim at GB, Marie at DB. We all have similar challenges and hurdles that we're trying to get all over. Timetable and capacity being one of them. So we've got the route between Glasgow and Birmingham. It's running 5 nights a week at the moment. It runs at 100 mile an hour. And we've been running since October. It's there, guys. You can see it. It's online. We're running at nearly 100% punctuality. Maggie was right before. The train is running incredibly well. The network is running incredibly well for us. It can cope with what we're doing. There was a massive reluctance to do this 2 years ago. But we've been able to, from my experience as a train driver, I knew that the railway would be able to cope with it. I knew that the trains would be able to cope with it. It was just about convincing people, not just outside of the rail, but within it, that how good we really are. And we really are good at what we do at the moment because of all the work that Ukraine do and all of us do to try and innovate and make us as good as we possibly can be. So the benefits, this 5 nightly service all year round is going to remove nearly 1,500 tonnes of carbon from a company's organisation. 15, that's 1 4-car. The scalability of what we're doing, that once we increase that to an 8 to a 12, once we increase the distance. So what I'm trying to create, we've got Glasgow to Birmingham at the moment. It's a proof of concept. We just wanted to get a train moving. We spent 2.5 years getting our licence, which is another story for another day. There was massive hurdles and challenges that I believe should be made easier for new entrants to come into the market. That again would make us better, bringing other companies in, other people in. We'd make the industry much more, much better than it will improve what we can offer anyway. And that Glasgow to Birmingham, we want to extend that to London by the end of the year. We found a location in East London that we're keen to get into later this year. We're working on the train paths, which are really key again at the moment. I can't underestimate how difficult it is sometimes. And I never thought it would be so difficult because we're running at high speed. We can integrate with passenger services so much easier than traditional freight. So again, the opportunity there is there for all to see. Whereas we've always thought capacity is hard to get hold of. It's not really, because we can integrate with passenger trains. Traditional freight has found it very difficult to do that. So the train timings have always been difficult to come across. But at the same time, there's lots of trains out there that don't run, your ghost trains that we have to navigate as well during the night. And predominantly that's where we're running at the moment. So, ultimately, I want to get to somewhere in 3 or 4 years where we've got a circular network and we're using infrastructure, we're using trains that are all there. This is all sustainable, by the way. This is all part of our values that we're adhering to in the future. We're starting as we mean to go on. And that network can see us serving, Glasgow, Birmingham, London, Doncaster, Newcastle, Edinburgh. And we're creating a circular network. And when we start talking about the logistics and what we can offer people in the future, next day, same day, every day, it'll just become natural because it'll be part of a circular network and a train will be running just like a passenger train service will. You will know that your train is going to leave, or your parcel or your goods or your products are going to leave a hub at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, leaving Scotland at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll be in Birmingham at 8 p.m. at night. It'll be in London at 10 p.m. at night. These are times that the logistics sector can't achieve, because they've got challenges with manpower, fuel increases, and I know costs have all come down. And this is a massive myth. We're cost effective. You're not telling me at £4,000 a night, and we replace 5 HGVs with that's not cost effective. They'll struggle to do that. Not only just manpower, but fuel. The increases of everything. So we're cost effective as well. I'm really frustrated by people that don't know, that tell me that it's 3 times more. It's not. Honestly, it's not. I'll show you the spreadsheets. I'll show you the figures that we're doing. And we're able to do that partly because we're very stream. This is all we do. This is our sole focus. So we've been able to keep everything quite lean. And we've been able to do that with the team of people we've got about us. And like Marie said earlier, people is really key for us. Diversity, making sure we've got, different people, different cultures, different ways of doing things within our business. It's so, so important to where we want to be in the future. And it'll make us, as a startup company, we wouldn't want to be any other way. So people are important, the trains are important, the infrastructure is important, but key to making this work and pushing it on now is getting that engagement with the customers. So use it. or lose it, basically, because we haven't got the rest of our lives to be working on this. And that's where we're at. So thanks again. Thanks for listening. I didn't expect so many people here. So thanks. And that's me done. Thank you. Thanks,
Use it or lose it. Wise words. Right. I would like to invite Ian Johnston to come and talk about D-gauge. There you go.
I'm going to just say next slide, please, rather than use the clicker. So we believe, I'm going to talk to you today about gauging and route clearance. Fundamentally, we believe there's an opportunity within freight that isn't being exploited. And rather than it being a true innovation, it's taking technology we already use from the passenger industry and applying that to freight. So we think that freight operators could open up new intermodal traffic routes right now. That would be shorter routes for less wasteful journeys, so giving you decarbonisation benefits, or totally new routes and new opportunities for revenue for you guys. Next slide, please. So the challenge, fundamentally, we've got a wagon and container that we need to move from A to B, so a longer route. Next slide, please. The way that we do that currently is through W gauges. So your wagon and container will be compliant to a particular W gauge. That W gauge will then have compatibility with that route. And that allows your wagon and container to run on the route. Next one, please. The beauty of that, I suppose, is that then the infrastructure maintainer or Network Rail will then manage and maintain that infrastructure so that, or that route to be W gauge compliant. Next slide, please. I wish I hadn't have done so many jumps. So the challenge with W gauges being at the center of that process is they're one size fits all, and they're not kept up to date with the innovations and the new wagons and the new containers that we're wanting to move. So W12 as an example for an intermodal container box shape, I suppose, it includes lots of uncommon wagons and containers. It also contains outdated wagons that we don't really use anymore. Enhancing is a lovely idea for this W12 enhancement, but that's a long-term strategy. What can we do now in the short term to move more wagons and more containers on the routes that currently exist? Next slide, please. So if we look at it slightly differently, we take the W gauges out of the equation. Next one. Oh, sorry, I've gone wrong here. So what that means is wagons and containers don't take up the available space within the W gauges. That's because of the conservatism, because we're squeezing lots of different shapes and wagons into this particular gauge. And what that also then leads to is a perceived lack of clearance. So sometimes we think that our wagon and container can't run on a particular route because the W gauge can't run on that route, but that's not necessarily the case. So if we take the W gauge out of the middle of the equation, next one, please. Oh. And we look at compatibility for the actual wagon and container on the route instead, we can unlock potentially new routes that we didn't think we could currently operate on. Next one, please. The beauty of that as well is once we've got permanent certification for that particular wagon and container on that route, it's up to the infrastructure maintainer to make sure that that can keep happening. So that if we can get that compatibility between the wagon and the route, that will remain there, and that we'll keep that throughout the life cycle of that particular, moving that particular stuff that you want to. So I've talked about it in words there, but let me show you visually what that looks like. So we've got the W6A lower and the W12 upper here. So as I've already mentioned, that is made up of lots of uncommon loads and uncommon wagons, and fundamentally it's quite big. Next slide. Here we've got an FEAC wagon, a really common wagon used by lots of people, and a common box as well, so 9'6", 2.5 metre box. This model is representative of that actual wagon and container rather than being a gauge. Next slide, please. This green space here is the difference between those two. So the difference between the W12 gauge and the actual FEAC wagon and the container. Now, this is purely statically we're looking at here. This is the space that we're not utilising by just using the gauges, and the gauges sitting in the middle of that process. If you also take into consideration the way that the different wagons move dynamically, that green area gets bigger. I'll go through some specific examples to show you the sort of differences it makes. Next slide, please. So we did I'm going to talk a little bit about TransPennine. So we looked at this for Network Rail, and we looked at it from an infrastructure modification perspective to try and reduce the amount of infrastructure modification that would be required, looking at the specific wagons and containers rather than the W gauges. But I'm going to use that and repurpose it for you guys to look at it from the other side and see what benefit you'd get for the vehicle operator, the people wanting to move the loads. So I'll look at two structures and then look at a little bit of route wide to see what the benefits are of looking at it in a slightly different way and not using the W gauges. Next slide, please. So Standage Tunnel is the first example I want to look at. It's about 3 miles long. Currently, W12 is not permitted to operate through Standage Tunnel, and that's because there's a tight clearance location right in the middle of the route. Next slide, please. The W12 gauge, when we look at that through Standage Tunnel, has 25 millimetres of clearance. That's not enough, fundamentally. The gauging team at Network Rail aren't happy to let the W12 gauge operate through the tunnel. If we then, next slide, please. If we then look at the FEAC and the 9 foot 6 2.5 metre box, we see that we get 94 millimetres of clearance. That's very, very, so you need 100 millimetres of clearance fundamentally in the upper sector. That's very, very close to needing no works being done fundamentally from an infrastructure perspective, and from a moving the load perspective, it's very close to actually just being allowed to run through there, whereas the W12 gauge just wouldn't. Next one, please. So to sum up, 70 millimetres improvement in clearance means that it could operate potentially through the structure, that specific wagon and container. Whoop, we've gone mad. There we go. Stalybridge Station. So the first one was a square peg round hole. This one we're going to look at a platform, which also obviously has to be tight to the infrastructure, so it causes problems. Currently, W6A lower, not permitted to run past this. This particular platform is critical to the route, and there's tight clearance along the whole length of the structure, so very costly to change. Next slide, please. So if we look at the W6A lower gauge, we see we've got 3 millimetres of clearance. Again, not enough for us to permit operation of this gauge past that structure. We'd either just not allow it, or there'd have to be a lot of costly infrastructure works. Next one. If we look at the FEAC, and the wagon, focusing on the actual wagon model this time, we see that it has 44 millimetres of clearance. Next one, please. So that's a 40 mil improvement in clearance. Sorry. And again, this means that the specific wagon and container, rather than the W6A, could actually operate past this structure at the minute with no works and nothing needs to be done. Next, please. So those are some specific structure examples. If we look at it, I'd also want to look at it route wide as well, because one structure does not a route make. So a lot of the TransPennine route isn't W12 or W6A compatible. So we took that same thinking of what if we look at a specific wagon and load and apply it, what difference does it make? Next slide, please. So route wide, we have 424 structures that the W6A gauge and the W12 gauge can't run past, that we'd have to, either there'd have to be modification or we'd have to find a different route, or it just wouldn't happen. Next. The FEAC in the 9 foot 6 2.5 box has 245. That's a pretty significant reduction in the number of structures that are prohibitive. Now, if we can find the golden route where we get rid of all of those structures that are prohibitive, then that opens up new opportunities for us. Next one, please. So overall, when we looked at this holistically, obviously I showed you some really nice examples with big number changes. The average improvement is around 26 millimetres in clearance. And the number of reduction in prohibitive structures is 42%, which is great. Next slide, please. We also then looked at some wagon and container combinations that aren't actually W12 compliant. And we found that even though there's 424 structures that are prohibitive to the W6A and W12, if we actually take bigger boxes than are compatible with the gauge and we assess them as the specific combination, we again have less problems just because we're not including fat that we don't need to. Next one, please. So fundamentally what I'm trying to say here is that the non-gauge compliant vehicles or combinations actually can have better clearance. So that's another thing that could be looked at in a slightly different way to open up that route availability. Next one, please. So what can we do now, I suppose, is a big question. I only showed you one example there, the FEAC in that particular box, or a few of the combinations. Next one, please. We actually have the dynamics for many of the most common wagons. I've just thrown up a list there for you. So you've got an idea if they mean anything to you, of something that we can use. We also have a library of containers that we can put on those wagons and assess in that more detailed way. We have some detailed models of the actual wagons themselves. I suppose this is where the data gap is, and we're hoping to work with Catapult to sort of close that gap. But where we don't have those wagons, we're quite easily able to create them using scanning technology and partnerships in that regard. Next slide, please. So what I suppose I'm trying to say is we can do it now, and this is why I said rather than it being a true innovation, it's taking the learnings from a different part of the industry and applying them to freight. Because we can do that now, we can actually unlock the benefits immediately. We just need to ask the right questions and look in the right places. The other thing that looking at it this way enables us to do, next slide, please. This might overlap. Next slide, please. Oh, no, go back. Oh, that text must have vanished. Anyway, we can look at different sort of restrictions. So if we have the detailed models, we can look at running it at different speeds, for example. Does going slower on that route mean that we get more clearance? We can use advanced gauging techniques like probabilistic and other things like that to look at it and give ourselves more clearance. And looking at it in that extra level of detail can glean some real benefits. So there's a couple of questions I would like you to ask yourself and then hopefully come and ask me about after this round of presentations. Next slide, please. Are there any critical routes that you can't currently utilise because of gauging issues? Is it that you want to move a bigger box than that gauge allows? Is it that that gauge can't quite go, but you know you're close? Or do you know a little bit more about your routes and your problems? And are there any specific structures that are causing you issues that you'd like to understand in a bit more detail? Because we can certainly help in that regard right now. Next one, I think that's it. There you go. That's it. Do come and find me after if either of those questions sounds like something you'd like to talk to me about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Moving on. So we would like to invite two speakers or one speaker and one supporting act. That's what I was told. That's what's going to happen from Wabtec and Atkins, both RIA members. Very proud to welcome you here.
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. My name's Simon Evans. For those that don't know me, I'm the Group Innovation Director for Wabtec, joined with Tim Danvers.
Tim Danvers from Atkins.
Okay, so we're going to present today something a little bit radical, a little bit different, something we've been working on for about 6 years in the background. Timing and technology is about right now, so we feel this is probably the time to start sharing stuff. Can't share too much because the patent attorney has told us not to, but I just want to give you a flavour of sort of things we're trying to do in the freight arena. So, industry problem statement. I mean, they're all pretty obvious. They've been talked about many times today in the past. Nothing unusual about that. But what we're trying to do is address all of those, you know, with one sort of product or technical strategy. Don't know if you want to say anything about these, Tim, about the specific pinch points, for example.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm supporting Simon is that Wabtec have got the product, they've got the technology, and it's how do we introduce this into our industry? I noticed earlier on today, RSSB were talking about innovation in terms of the standards and how you do the business cases and that. So part of my role in supporting Simon with this technology is how we join those dots, how we make those connections, how do we make sure that we've got the right political part sort of supporting this technology, because there's a lot of innovation that just sort of sits there, and this is something that we can have today and with a bit of luck, we'll have definitely in service next year. I keep making lots of promises on Simon's behalf about what this is going to deliver, but the thing I would just say to this is, and I won't quote the person's name, but somebody from the DFT said that this technology is game-changing and world-leading. So I'll let you go through all this technical stuff of what we're going to do. But yeah, so my role is to make those dots join and make it happen, and promise lots of things.
And he does promise an awful lot, I must admit. So as the sort of title suggests, it's a sort of self-bound bogey, gives it away a little bit, but we'll delve into that a little bit more. I don't know if that's missed one. Yeah, hang on a minute.
About this route clearance.
You can just ask Phoebe to help you with it.
BB, can you help me with that? That'll do. Thank you. So it's all about energy waste for me. We waste an enormous amount of energy in freight. We probably don't even realise how much, but try to conceptualise that and put that into sort of numbers. So when we apply a single brake application, 75 mile an hour on a 1,600 ton wagon set, you're roughly burning around about 900 megajoules. That's waste energy. A lot of that is going into the environment as just heat from the brake pads, etc. Next, please, Phoebe. And just to put that into perspective, next one as well, please. Thanks. That's around about 25 houses worth of electricity per day, just with one brake application. Multiply that through then, and you start to understand the size of the amount of energy that we're wasting. Next, please. So our solution really is to look at every one of those issues that we looked at earlier, the problem statements, and trying to address every one of those. Next, please. So our proposition is really to develop, introduce an independent, low-cost, low-mass energy recovery system to both new and existing wagons. We also have a passenger stream looking at passenger vehicles. We're looking at a modular design of equipment as well, so it can be used in both passenger and freight, and it's low cost because we're going to capitalise on the economies of scale. We're looking at volume production. I think that's the only way we can drive down costs in the industry. This will be a simple modification to newer existing wagons. We're developing a unique traction motor. That's the key to enable this with the University of Nottingham. That's progressed quite well. We've got some Innovate funding for that, and we're moving to the second stage shortly. The short-term performance is optimized from the maximum braking energy. So that means that we're going to, with the motor, the system is basically recovering as much energy as we can under normal operating conditions. We don't want to make it too big, and that's the trick really. It doesn't have to be a massive motor. We're talking about the right size motor for this particular application. There's no requirement to remove, replace or upgrade existing locos. That's really important. We don't want to have to go and change everything, add new locomotives and add any new rolling stock into the industry as it is. We can't afford to do that. We have to work with what we've got. It'll also be able to provide auxiliary power on wagons, and we are introducing WSP as a standard. We've also got a separate work stream on WSP right now in freight, but this also introduces that. And we'll be controlling these power bogies through the existing train lines and the brake pipe as it is now. Next, please. And again, one click. So just for simplicity, really, regen braking is active during normal service braking, downhill descents, or even using surplus engine power. So we recover that energy, we store it locally in a small battery module. Okay. Next, please. And then the traction and tractive effort, traction power and tractive effort is active during normal acceleration or inclines, or even last mile operation. That stored energy that we store during braking is just released to give us train power and tractive effort. That's blended with the loco power. Next slide. So what about performance? I don't know what that's doing, but that's a loco behind there. So this is just a conventional freight train with 32 platforms. So you look at about 15 ton trailing load. That's a Class 66 EMD 710 with close to 3,000 horsepower, just over. Next, please. So if you now configure that with the proposition that we've just talked about, self-powering each of those with an independent power source. Remember, we're not getting power from anywhere else. It's only what it's recovered from braking. We can deliver a short-term up to 10 megawatts and 793 kilonewtons. In fact, the starting tractive effort's a little bit higher than that. They can deliver that for 10 minutes, and it's about 33% duty cycle on there. So that's what we sized the motor and the system for. Next, please. And again, please. Thank you. So what you're seeing here is a sort of acceleration curve. So this really puts into perspective the performance improvement you're going to get from a rake of hybridized wagon sets like this. You can see sort of on the left-hand side, you've got the diesel only in blue. So that's traditional, takes a long time to accelerate. And then you have the hybrid diesel, which is the, as you shown there, up to 10 megawatts of power and 793 kilonewtons in orange. For giggles, I put in the Class 150 as a reference. So you can start to see now the performance is actually a little bit better than a Class 150. But that's important because it shows that we can start running in sort of in passenger environments. And that's really important. Start understanding, when we talk about pinch points, that all of a sudden becomes a very interesting conversation. Normally, you'd need 3 or 4 locos on the front to manage that. The starting tractive effort, like I said, is a little bit higher. You can actually get up to over 1,400 kilonewtons out of that set for a very short period, just to get you moving. And it might be inclement weather, might be running up Shap, for example, when it's wet. Brake blending, you got about, with these examples, about 62% regen. This is by simulation. That's giving you a 3% G brake rate. So quite normal, quite standard. With that, you'll get around about 25% with that particular consist, depending on the route, of fuel saving. And then the CO2 savings, about equivalent to that again, but you're saving an enormous amount over the year, keep running that sort of consist. And the battery only range, if you switched off the diesel engine and wanted to run quietly through Birmingham New Street, for example, you can run up to 25 kilometres straight off the battery. Obviously, you'd need some mods to the loco to enable that. Next, please. There's a load of operator benefits up there. I'm not going to go through them, but obviously you've got the fuel emissions on the top right there. Significant savings there. I mean, effectively, you could recover up to sort of 40-45%, depending on really where the routes are and what consist you're running. But you will benefit from significant fuel reduction, which means you can run sets with less locos. You don't have to double head, maybe just single head now. You can get 0 emissions through stations. Maintenance is a big benefit. You're using less engine power. That means less energy through the engine. If you're basing maintenance on megawatt hours, you're reducing your maintenance cost. All the performance has increased, as you saw earlier. Oh, that'll do, thanks. So what's it mean to the freight industry as a whole? So if you're to bang on sort of 50% of all the wagons in the UK, that could reduce carbon reduction up to 22% based on existing emissions. And again, the same sort of savings with fuel and maintenance cost. We think we can probably recover the investment over a 4-year period if you're running sort of 80 to 100,000 miles. Why intermodal is really important here. Also, because you've got increased acceleration and the future capability, you can now start applying EP braking. So braking latency becomes less. You can start to brake quicker. That'll enable the freight to work more efficiently with passenger timetables, passenger services. And that could reduce costly infrastructure upgrades as well. So you're talking about infill gaps. You could even clear the infill gaps, by using this sort of technology. And again, last mile operation. I put up to 40 kilometres range there if you're running at 50 kph. That might be just because your loco's failed and you need to get off the main line, or it could be that you're running on a non-electrified section, for example. Next, please. So where are we? We've sort of done a feasibility stage. That's lasted the best part of a year because we've done a freight and a passenger one. We've completed the FOEC funded, the Innovate UK funded FOEC for passenger. That's done and dusted. The next stage is due to start sort of April time. We'll have prototype equipment by second half of 2024. That's really down to the motors. You know, again, they're unique, they're bespoke, not been done before, so a lot of effort going into that. Probably the best part of $1 million. And then trials, second half 2025. Sorry, I should say 2024 to first half of 2025. Production probably second half of 2025. So that's what we're looking at. And the idea is it's got to be volume again. It's really driven by, because we're not going to get the costs down. We're not going to meet an objective to lower the cost of running a railway unless we do. But, I think that just concludes. I think that's it. That's the last one.
Can I just add
Yeah.
the final points? So as I said at the start, part of my role with this with Simon, when we started this conversation, it was aimed at saving money, I would say, on maintenance. But the more you start to look at what the potential is, you find that this starts to be, as I said at the start, a game changer. The idea that you can now use freight and into use freight with passenger service, you can get that acceleration, starts to change the dynamics of the railway a little bit. So the fact that we don't have to spend lots of money on big infrastructure, passing loops and things of that nature. So it is one of these things where you start off with an idea. It's a bit like the Post-it, you know. You didn't start off with a Post-it that with glue that wanted to stick. It ended up being something that wasn't what you started off with. And in a way, this is how this is developed. It's become something which has got many, many applications. And at the moment, it's quite, how can I say, quite exciting in terms of where things are going to go to. And it is part, and I'm looking at David Clark sitting in the audience there, it is part of the Ukraine family as well. Nottingham University, you know, they're part of the Ukraine. And I think it's important that you sort of look at what you can get, adapt and adopt technology from other sectors and around the patch. So that's part of my role, is to bring that to Simon, then he works it out and does all the clever stuff. So hopefully that was useful for everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Would have loved to have took questions, but we got to go.
You heard about this here first, right? Are we the first ones to hear about this? Breaking news? Okay. Bending news, I guess, then. Right, so I would like to invite John May from Knorr Bremse to talk about your projects, and you'll be hosting our Rolling Stock Group meeting soon enough as well.
Yes, we will be. So hello, I'm John May. I am responsible for digital services business development here in the UK for Knorr Bremse. What does that mean? I bridge the gap between our sales team and our engineering team, bringing ideas and solutions that we can develop to solve customer problems. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just a bit of background about KB in freight. We are already involved in freight, maybe below the radar and not very visible to everybody, but certainly providing friction from our Manchester facility. We provide equipment for air supply, as you know, already on passenger trains and so forth, and an extensive spares and repairs capability. But we also have the ability to detect derailment. We have a system that connects to the air supply and on extreme shock can dump the air supply and contain derailment if it, in the unlikely event it does happen. So that's already an innovation that will be coming to the UK soon. But more importantly than that, we're looking at continuing to develop a system that we've already had for some years now around wheel slide protection that enables us to detect axle rotation and so on, and it being self-powered on a wagon in order to solve some of the industry challenges and problems that we've been seeing recently. Next slide, please. in our sort of trawl of issues and problems that we've seen in the industry with the customers, then a few obviously do stand out around derailment and the unfortunate events that can give. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's very much related to that a system on a wagon that can help understand its behavior around load distribution, potentially shock, where the parking brakes are and so on. And we're active in finding a solution to be able to address some or all of those depending on what the customer needs are. But we have to be sensitive. So it's very easy for us to say that, we can do this. We have to do it at the right price point. We also have to appreciate that we have to be self-powered. And we have to make sure that the benefits are clear so that the payback period and so on is effective. So next slide, please. So why KB in the UK? So we've got quite extensive capability in the UK. So the good thing about us innovating in this area is that we have a local team that is steeped in the knowledge of brake control. Obviously the history behind that with Westinghouse and the team here in the UK, but we also have an engineering innovation team that are dedicated to this type of project and also other projects. But we also can make product in the UK. We actually have an extensive production facility that makes the cube control for the passenger industry, the brake control product. And perhaps not quite so obvious to everybody that we do have digital capability in the UK as well. And that is something that's expanding. So why is that important? Well, the problems that we've got cannot be just solved mechanically or electromechanically. We have to have oversight of what is happening at the axle level in order to be able to detect, understand how that is behaving, and also inform operator and wagon owners of potential problems that they can mitigate before incidents get worse or damage or infra issues get worse. The good news is that we can leverage the KB globally to help with this. So it's not just the local knowledge that we have here. We have obviously deep knowledge in brake control and electronics centrally, mechatronics and systems. And there's a load of other stuff around doors and other things, but not so relevant for freight. But also we have an extensive digital business unit in Munich, and that allows us to leverage some capability there. In addition to a company called Nexia that may not be well known to everybody, but provides the asset tracking capability on European wagons. We can leverage that capability to against the wheel slide protection and detection system that we're looking at. Next slide, please. So this is the last slide, and it's one that I want to dwell on because with the capability that we have in the UK, we're able to look at things from an end-to-end solution perspective. So when we talk about an electromechanical system that can prevent or protect wheel slide and generate power on a wagon, that's a very electromechanical thing, which the guys in the UK have already had in development for some time. It has been trialled, by the way. It's technology that's been around for nearly 10 years that we're leveraging into this project. But it's not just about that. It's about what, all the way to the end customer, how a user interface may work in order to visualize what they're seeing on the wagon. And there's multiple steps in between. Because we've been involved in monitoring on things like HVAC systems in the UK, we understand very well the challenge from getting data from the vehicle in front of a customer in a usable way. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in between, whether it's data analytics, cloud infrastructure, ability to actually get the data off the vehicle and so on. We've got a good experience of that in the UK. So solution integration perspective, we've got a good understanding. But we can't do all of that on our own. So clearly we can leverage the brake brake knowledge that we've got and the wheel slide protection knowledge we've got. And what we are encouraging SMEs and third parties and universities is to work with us to provide some of the solutions. There's some faces in the room that we're talking to, and they know we're talking to you, but we can't share that. But we want to combine that and innovate and bring that together. And it's important because the speed of implementation can be accelerated by using some of this knowledge. And also important for the SMEs. So we've had, even today, several conversations about how SMEs are challenged to scale. And we believe we can help those SMEs to scale whilst protecting their IP in order to provide the total solution. So we're very open and willing to work with people for the greater good. But it's all underpinned by customer collaboration. So I've had many, many conversations where someone might say something, I've got this problem, and they articulate it in a certain way. And then I say, hang on a minute, you said something important there. And actually the problem they have is slightly different to the one that they're articulating. And one of the benefits of the system that we're going to be demonstrating and trialing during the middle of this year is that it allows us to collect data to validate those hypotheses. And I'm strongly suspecting we'll find stuff that we don't know about in terms of the behavior of wheel slide and axle rotation live on the network. So we're really looking forward to gathering that data through this year in order to prove the hypothesis and find out where the other value items are. Now, I haven't touched on all the potential benefits of such a system. I think they've already been articulated by our friends in Wabtec. There's plenty of benefits that are there, but there's primary benefits, secondary benefits, fleet oversight, understanding how the infra is performing. Maybe you have hotspots of problems that are causing wagon problems, or wagons are causing problems to the infrastructure. We'll be able to understand and visualize where that's going to happen. But finally, I think this ability to scale is really important. So whilst there may be a sort of a view that KB is a big behemoth and maybe not able to respond quickly, hopefully I've explained that with our local capability, we're able to act in an agile way, and with the benefit of some of our friends in this room, we should be able to scale and visualize that and demonstrate that through this year, ready for hopefully first product sales early next year, during next year. I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you.
And if you don't mind me promoting you a bit more, so you will be hosting our RIA Rolling Stock Group in Melksham on 25th of April. So if you're interested in the work, please sign up. Right, we're now coming back to our hosts, Unipart, and well, we'll talk about what you're working, Sam, on, and then we will wrap up with our group from iPort Rail. There you go. We are running a bit behind, but I think it's okay.
That's a not so subtle hint. Okay. Okay. Oh. Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone who's here today. I'm Sam. I work for Instrumentel. Yes, we are part of the Unipart group. For those who don't know, I'll give a quick overview about Unipart, Instrumentel, and our role within the Unipart group. I'll try and keep it quick. I'll try and keep flying through. So, Instrumentel, founded out of the University of Leeds just over 20 years ago, and have been solving problems in terms of extracting data from an extreme and remote environments, allowing people to make a better decision about what to do with their assets and when. Over the years, we've worked in a number of different industries, aerospace, nuclear, found a home in rail because of our ability to adapt what our solutions are able to provide. And we've spent a lot of time, as I'll demonstrate in a bit, of making it a service that operators, train owners, leasing companies, etc., can really extract the most value from. So integrating it within a day-to-day operation. And there's a case study that I'll touch on in a little bit. We are a very well-established business in the UK. We do have a number of partners, predominantly on the passenger side, although the eagle-eyed amongst you will see a freight customer of ours there as well as doing work in partnership with the RSSB and things like that in the past as well. So we do have a really well-established base, and our coverage at the moment in the UK is pretty significant. There's a few animations that it looks like it's jumped through, but just want to talk through here a specific example of why we are experts in engines. So engines is what I want to talk about today. One of the first customers, a great customer to have that we've ever worked with, Mercedes on their Formula One team. They use our equipment to design the perfect high-performing engines for their Formula One cars. So as you can imagine, that's been pretty good over the last 20 years, been pretty successful. We designed the circuitry, the telemetry system that goes inside the engine, that doesn't use any batteries, doesn't use any wires. Because of the movement of the engine, you can't use that in that environment. Extreme temperatures, huge amounts of data, millions of samples taken every second. All of that is about developing an optimal performing engine. They need that engine to run for 2,500 miles. Any more than that, there's excess in there. So they're talking about shaving microns out of the engine, taking weight out. So in order to develop an optimal performing asset, they need to know exactly what temperature those components are going to get to before it implodes. Which is quite a spectacular sight. Anybody who's witnessed that will know. What we do for the rail industry, it's not the same technology. What we've got to run for is not 2,500 miles, it's 20 years, it's 30 years. And so the reality of our equipment in the rail industry is actually ruggedized, typically military grade equipment that's fitted, calculating not just the performance of an individual engine, but actually the entire powertrain. So we're looking at a wider range of data that's coming in, continuously collecting that data 24/7, and integrating with existing on-train systems as well. So that's where you're really trying to extract the value that's already there. And immediately you'll look at that and go, well, there's no obvious comparison between a Formula One car and a train, right? But the output of what both of those vehicles are trying to achieve are very similar. They both need to have peak performance for as long as possible, and their downtime needs to be as minimal as possible. So the learning that we've taken from our work in Formula One and brought into the rail industry is what's seen our success. And I'm going to give a quick case study on that in a minute. The visual of the UK map on the right hand, hopefully you can sort of see it, even though it's not come through, is we've got coverage of over 600 vehicles in the UK every second, 45,000 signals. That's a lot of data. Trying to look at that as an individual is not going to work. You might be able to do it for a single unit. You might be able to do it for a single asset at one point, but you need that machine learning. You need the ability for that, for the system to be able to turn all of that data into useful information. And that's where we have our expertise on that front. We can provide that end-to-end solution. Everything from a sensor, remote transmission of data, the analytics, visualization, and crucially that end piece, that performance improvement, helping people make a better decision about what to do and when to do it. But we're more than happy to provide that collaboration with our customers, with other people in the industry. If somebody already has a front end that they want to use, if they want to feed it into an existing maintenance management system, that's not a problem. If someone's already got a load of data and sensors, we're happy to collaborate and work with them on that front, and we've done that in a number of different guises. We do provide monitoring systems across the board. Let's just jump ahead quickly. But I want to talk to you quickly now about a project that we've been working on for a few years now, and this is something we've jointly spoken with Porterbrook and Cross Country at various conferences, and I'll give a very short overview. But ultimately, this is about giving a system which allows a shift in maintenance. All right, so we've tried to come up with a catchy name, a maintenance shift. Hopefully, a few people get the reference there. So what is the problem that we're trying to address here? Firstly, you've got a train arriving at the depot. You've got 20 odd jobs to do before it needs to re-enter service. There's just simply not enough time to do everything that you'd like to be able to do. So you need to make a tough decision about what to prioritize. And ultimately, safety comes first, right? So we always do the things which make sure that that train is safe for service. Some of the stuff that gets deferred, some of the things that get pushed down the line might not necessarily impact the safety, but they're going to impact customer experience. They're going to impact fuel consumption. They're not going to have the most optimal performing asset. What can we do about this? We need to make a better decision about what to do and when. What we've done with the solution that we have on the TurboStar units here is install our diagnostic hub. And I have an example of this out, in the Ukraine area just to the side there. You can come and see the equipment. You can see how that data comes off in real time and how the output works, which is the really interesting thing. All of that data is made available in raw format. It's not our data. We're collecting it and providing it to our customers, but we're also helping them transform that and make a better decision. So getting alerts on what to do and when to do it. It has been a program that we've run for 3-4 years. Started with a first in class, proved that it works, helped them save money in terms of their operation, and then complete that fleet rollout. We're now continuously evolving the output of that system. And that's the really key point here, is it's not just about fitting equipment, providing data. It's about how do you integrate that into day-to-day service? How do you make sure that the right people are getting the right information? And we do that through this virtuous circle on the right-hand side. Workshops that we conduct in person, remotely, supporting people coming from what does the data say on one side, and then on the other side where you've got what does the engineer team or the maintenance team want to know about. Bring those two together to make sure that those events are triggering the right activity. One quick example here, which is really useful to see. Yes, it's a passenger train, but who doesn't have an air system on their vehicle? Everybody involved a maintenance facility will know about air stand-up tests. You've got to run the pressure up and wait for it to come down. It's an activity that takes a bit of time. It's about conducting a check. Because the way that we monitor that data, we can automate that test completely. So there's no need for that activity to take place in the depot anymore. So that's saving them 3,600 hours over that 18-month period. Significant time saving there. It's also, because of the machine learning model that we've created, we're able to detect a failure 4.5 months in advance of it being found in that maintenance facility. So there's a really significant benefit of being able to predict and ultimately prevent a failure happening. And we've shown that actually 85 failures can be prevented in that 18-month period, same period. So not only are you saving a ton of time, you're improving the reliability of your asset as well. Really great example of the sorts of things that can be done. The big part, though, is about changing not just the equipment on the train, but it's the people, it's the culture. How do we make sure that people are engaged with this? The way that we work is by creating those internal champions, solving those problems that are the lower hanging fruit initially, getting people a quick win, getting people engaged, making sure it fits with their day-to-day process. So how do they normally get told that there's a problem? How do they normally look to get a instruction of what to prioritize? Our system has to blend into that. We can't expect everybody to log into a completely new system if they're not going to get the usability out of it. So that's a big part of it. Lots on training. And ultimately, that N1 is that trust. If they won't trust it, it'll never be successful. That's something we've invested heavily in, had really great success, and our partnerships that we have is where we've really seen that growth go. So, started with the problem at the beginning. Reality is that problem, lovely fast flowing graphics there. The reality is the train now arrives at the depot with 8 of those previous 20 jobs having been automated. You also then have a list of prioritized tasks set based on the risk to service, not just safety, it's the other factors as well. What's the risk to service that's happening there? With an end result being that you have a fleet that is more reliable and more available. Significant benefits that I've given you a flavour of just there already. Everything is available via our web platform, Paradigm Insight. Again, that's on display around the corner there. More than happy to talk to anybody in a bit more detail if you want to come and see that in reality for this 170 fleet. And I think that might be the end. Yes. There we go. So if there's any questions, please come and see me. I'll be around the corner later.
Well, and so we are now wrapping up our day with an exciting site visit ahead of us. So I would like to, why are you laughing, Paul? It is exciting. So I would like to invite Steve Freeman, the Managing Director of iPort Rail and our host in the afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My children at home tell me I can't even work the TV remote, so wish me luck with this. I can tell you're all really excited about this trip to iPort Rail later on. Feel it, the tension. This, by way of a small introduction to what you're going to see later on, we are going to start, I think, with a short video, which gives a flavour of what you're going to see this afternoon, albeit you're not visiting the warehouse now. But I think if I do that, do I need to do anything else to get it to run? Oh, there we go. Is there sound? There should be sound, I think, which we're not getting. Yeah, I'll do a talk over. So we did this. This video was done with Amazon, and it was meant to demonstrate the sea journey into Immingham Hull, where we did last year. We undertook a trial with which we called the Humber Express with GFDS. Operationally, that was a successful trial. Commercially, less so, and we're hoping to revisit that in the future. Have we got sound now? Technology gets you every time. What we need is a sound innovator. We're struggling for sound, I think. Here we go.
Also, it's important to say that iPort is connected to 91% of the UK population within a 4-hour drive. Connectivity is an important aspect of what we're doing here at iPort Rail. It's especially important now with road haulage struggling the way it is to recruit drivers, and there's a huge shortage of drivers within the HGV industry. So rail has got a real role to play in that, rail freight particularly. First and foremost, it's a very underutilised resource within the global supply chain. It's green, it's sustainable, it can take up to 76 lorry movements off the road for each train that moves. It provides a port-to-door service which is smooth and reliable. It can help clear customs. Here at iPort, it provides a seamless transition from Europe and the rest of the world into Yorkshire. However, it's important to say that we've still got capacity, so we're looking forward to welcoming you here at iPort Rail.
Okay. And for those of you who are coming to iPort Rail, we do welcome you and will welcome you. So I'm going to give you a very brief overview of the journey so far. So consultation to develop what was the Rossington Colliery site began in 2006. So quite a long journey. In 2018, we were open for operations in February. September of that year, we had our first daily train service, which was from Southampton, run by GB Rail Freight. And that train is still running today, thankfully, along with many others. So during the year following 2018, up to the end of 2019, we lifted from 1 train a day to 6 trains a day. We've peaked at about 8 trains a day at various times, and we're running generally at around about 7 trains a day as we speak. Volumes are a bit down at the moment, so when people talk about trains per day, that's a little bit of a misnomer because it's all about the volume. You can run as many trains around as you like, but if they're not full, you're not doing the volume. So that's an important factor which we'll touch on later. So new services and a port expansion is planned for this year. So we're hoping to get, currently we've got services that run from Southampton, Felixstowe, we've done Teesport, we've done Humber last year as well, also Daventry and Moss End. So we're pretty well connected. We're looking for a gateway service to start this year, London Gateway, and a further Felixstowe service. So this graph here is by way of demonstrating the speed at which iPort Rail has grown. It's the fastest growing inland rail terminal in the country by quite a bit, really. So if you look at the green actual line on the right left-hand side here, phase 2 is the blue line that shows what we're going to do as we move into phase 2, and then the dotted green line shows the projection once we've got phase 2 built. So currently running about 7 trains a day, as I said, and we will quickly get to 11 or 12 once we've got phase 2 built, which starts this year. I think the important thing to say with this is that if you look at the other lines in the graph are demonstrating Derft, Hams Hall, Bift, Midlands Gateway, all of which have grown, but they've taken longer to get to where they are now, and it's taken us a lot quicker. Some of that is because of the location that we're in. It's a really good location, great, well connected to the rail, both rail and road, and some of it is to do with the fact that we're independent. So we welcome all comers to iPort Rail. We're not just dare I say, a Freightliner terminal or a GB Rail Freight terminal. We're actually open access, which makes a big difference. Didn't press it hard enough. Oh, I've gone back. Oh, I knew I'd have trouble. Okay. Whilst we have grown very quickly and quite rapidly, it's important to say that there have been challenges along the way, and there continue to be challenges. And whilst we measure growth by the number of rail freight services, we see it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about container volume. So it's not just about the number of trains we have in, it's about how full those trains are. And we need all of our rail freight services to operate at full capacity, and that's something that the industry is tackling at the moment and is well aware of. We're certainly well aware of it at iPort. So to increase the container throughput at iPort Rail, we've been developing a range of initiatives and essentially 3PL services which are helping to unlock the value of rail freight. So for the last 18 months, we've been partnering with a company called Eco2Loco, who have been providing 3PL services for us, which has enabled us to do things outside of the curtilage of iPort Rail to provide a better service for our clients. And it's also reselling space on trains, of which there is quite a lot. If you look around, certainly the industry, around about, well, most trains run around about 75% full or 25% empty, in some cases worse than that. So we've been developing something that will help to fill those spaces, and that's where I turn to Paul Bathgate, who's now going to talk about something called RailX. Sorry, Paul, I went too quick. There you go.
Thanks, Steve. Not by design, but an excellent introduction into a product called RailX, which will address some of the challenges which Steve's alluded to in his talk, but also been emphasised during the whole of the morning presentations. And my name is Paul Bathgate. I'm really going to focus on RailX, not Eco2Loco per se. But but about 4 years ago, just as we were starting out, Steve gave me and the team what I thought was a fairly simple challenge, which was just to increase the number of trains through iPort Rail. I think we've got one train at that stage. And I thought that would be an easy task. There's only 4 freight operating companies in the UK, so I knock on each door and I invite them to run more trains. We did knock on Tim's door. He has brought some more trains, but what Tim wants to do, he wants a guaranteed contract in place for the sustainment of those train services. And that's true of all the freight operators who are largely contracted by the shipping companies. So then I thought, okay, well, if we need to bring more clients to the rail, that's going to be fairly straightforward. In Doncaster, there's lots of clients. I'll knock on a few doors, and we'll bring some more clients to the rail industry. And actually, the response was very good. But I think what if there's takeaway for me today, it's not about rail, it's not about the rail industry, it's about the UK logistics industry. And all the clients we spoke with said, yes, we want the benefits of rail and rail freight, but I want it as a delivered logistics solution. And that invariably means you've got to tag road into the first or the final mile of rail. So it's about the integration. It's truly intermodal. I think what you'll see this afternoon is how we bring those two transport elements together. Okay, so I'm not going to press that button because if Steve's having problems, I certainly will. Next slide, please, Phoebe. So the key objectives for RailX are fourfold. And firstly, it's to fill the empty capacity on the network, which is significant, and I'll talk about that a little bit further. There is significant empty capacity on existing rail freight services. If we do that, we increase the revenue and profitability for freight operating companies, but I also meet Steve's ask, which I get more volume through his rail terminal. And if we're successful, we'll repeat this across the UK, so we'll increase the volume through all UK rail freight terminals. So what about the road hauliers? Because that's our target market. We want to shift from road to rail. Well, it simply means that the road hauliers shift their mode of operation from the long haul routes on the motorways that we use every day, and they focus on the final and first miles. And what we've recognized is if we can give those road hauliers 3 to 4 journeys per day, which is what RailX will do, they will make more money at less cost with lower carbon than a long haul trip down to Felixstowe and back. Importantly, they get home in time for tea, they see their family, and they generate ultimately less carbon. It also means that some of the low carbon technologies such as EV and hydrogen, we could start to introduce on road because we're just operating on a final mile basis. And then fundamentally, it provides greater access to the UK logistics market to rail. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I would imagine in this room now, most people understand rail and are from the rail industry. But what we need to be doing is talking to the UK logistics industry, the freight forwarders and the SMEs. It's that industry which is moving the 90% of the UK intermodal volume on road today. Next slide, please, Phoebe. Now, it's a video. I suspect we may have the same sound problems as the last one. We'll give it a go. If it doesn't work, we'll just skip straight through it. This video, by the way, was produced by Steve's son.
With an average of around 25% of intermodal freight services being unused on a daily basis, our platform will play a key role in accessing that spare capacity. Use of the platform provides access to the security and benefits of an efficient, reliable and competitive managed port-to-door service achieved with the ease of a few clicks.
We want to make rail freight more accessible and increase the utilisation of the rail freight network. Technology will allow us to do that and do it at scale. We're building a digital platform that connects all parts of the customer journey together, making the process of buying and selling rail freight very simple. For example, if you're a freight operator, you'll be able to quickly and easily share and sell available capacity across all of your services. If you're a customer or a freight forwarder, you'll be able to book rail freight just in the same way you can book a train ticket or a passenger flight online and instantly. If you're a haulier, our platform will send you final mile jobs which you can accept with the click of a button. Our platform will speed up collections, automate paperwork and accelerate payouts.
Companies are increasingly looking for ways to reduce their carbon footprint. Moving your goods by rail can really help achieve that, providing significant carbon reduction and unlocking carbon credits. This platform provides the gateway to achieving those sustainability goals.
There's much more we've got planned. Longer term, we've established a roadmap that will expand the platform into other areas such as customs, capacity-based pricing, and even driver well-being. Our platform has the ability to grow and scale across the entire logistics chain, both in the UK and beyond.
And the last personality there is Tom Giulio, who's our CTO. I'm not sure if he's in the room, but he's at the back of the room. He's at the back of the room, so I'll introduce him a little later on. Next slide, please. Can I have a show of hands for those in the audience who've used the Trainline app? So, a shortcut to this, I know it's long in the day, this is a graveyard slot, but hopefully we've saved the best to last. RailX is not unlike the Trainline. It will allow a freight forwarder, an end customer, to book directly onto intermodal rail freight services that are running today, and it is that easy. So how big is the market? I think you heard some figures from Maggie this morning. The UK haulage market is in excess of 3 billion, of which 10% is moving on rail today. So we're talking about a £300 million market. 25% of that market is unused, at least 25%. We see that every day with the trains that come into iPort rail, and that represents a lost opportunity to the industry of an excess of £80 million. So that's our target market. In reality, what we find, RailX is a rail freight booking app. We've not failed a booking yet, and we've made 2,000 bookings since we started our business model. Next slide, please. Thank you. Business benefits. We've talked about this at length. We anticipate in our business model by year 5, we'll be generating a carbon saving in excess of 30,000 tonnes. So what does 30,000 tonnes mean or look like? So for every container that we move from Felixstowe to Doncaster, we're saving about 200 kilograms. That's equivalent to 20 trees for every container. And whilst we've been sat here today, we've moved probably 300 to 400 containers through iPort Rail. So that's the benefit that we can deliver today. We're not looking too far in the future. If you're a company out there that's moving rail freight, intermodal rail freight, and it's moving by road, go and ask your staff why, and let's explore the benefits of rail because it's instantaneous. Just on that previous slide, when you run, for those who take the opportunity for the tour, Andy Wishart, who's in the room, hopefully, and there's Andy, he's our ops director, and Rob. They will describe some of the challenges, the real challenges that we have today about that road-rail interface and some of the benefits we will look to deliver. So almost, and this sounds a bit odd, but if you get in the mindset of you're a road haulier, you're a HGV driver, and you've got a load to deliver to iPort Rail, that hopefully brings the experience to life, and that Andy and Rob will help you with the rest. Is the time right? Is the time ever right? When we started this journey, we weren't coming out of Brexit. We were dealing with the issues of Brexit, huge shock to UK logistics. We were just rolling into COVID, yet another shock to UK logistics. We hit HGV driver shortages, we had fuel crisis, we had Suez crisis, and at every opportunity, we found that our inquiries went up. So we are in growth. There is a demand out there for intermodal rail freight. What we need to do is make it easier to access, and that's what we're about. Next slide, please. So what is the opportunity? Next slide, please. And this is a pitch. We're quite fortunate. We did get some initial funding from Innovate UK on a FOAC, funded by the DFT. So we did a prototype before 2020. But since then, Steve and iPort Rail has effectively acted as our catapult, as our Innovate catapult. It's a sandpit. We've been fortunate enough to be able to play in an operational environment and test and adapt some of our business models and our thinking. And now we're in the process of automating that through the digital platform. We've secured investment from a Northern Powerhouse major venture capitalist. I can't mention who it is because that's subject to NDA. So if you could just go back one, please. But for us to grow and grow at scale, I need to match that funding from corporate investment. So if anybody in this room is a corporate or a corporate investor or knows somebody who would be interested in, then Ian, our financial director, he will hand you a copy of our 2023 prospectus in return for your business card. That's the pitch over. And together, we will transform the UK intermodal rail freight industry. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So the use case. It should be painful for all of us if we did a live demonstration up here. So Tom at the back of the room with a TV screen, within 2 to 3 minutes, he will show you how easy it is to make a booking on RailX for a container or a number of containers, including the final mile, and how that booking will be confirmed by the freight operating company, how that journey will be monitored throughout, and how ultimately you'll be invoiced for it. And it is extremely simple. It's just a cultural change within the UK logistics sector that we need to address. QR code will take you to a website which is still being developed, but will give you further insights. That is it. Thank you.
We did save the best for last. We did. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of our speakers today and for our wonderful audience who kept the room full and in full attention. We have postponed the bus a bit to come and pick us up at 2:50. So you have half an hour for a bit of coffee, demonstrations, a little bit of a chat. As I said, we'll go to iPort Rail. We'll come back here quickly, but I recommend you take your stuff with you, and then we'll drop you back off at the railway station, hopefully before 4. All right, thank you so much, and hope to see you again soon.